Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today about unpacking PPP forgiveness. Please post your questions in the Q&A only. There are a lot of people on, and the moderator will only be able to get to questions in the Q&A section. A recording of this webinar and slides will be posted shortly on our community site at realtime.inc.com. And later in the day, we will email a copy to participants. A little bit about myself. I am the founder and CEO of MultiFunding. I'm an Inc. columnist writing regularly on business lending issues. I've advised prior administrations about the business credit markets, as well as regularly working with the Federal Reserve Bank. I have a book out called The Growth Dilemma, and for my EO friends out there, I'm a proud member of EO Philadelphia. You're not here today to learn about me, you're here today to learn about PPP forgiveness, so let's dig in. My lawyers asked that I read a few disclaimers. We are in an unprecedented time in history, and the information available to us is changing rapidly. Please refer to our most current presentation for education. The information provided is based upon our best judgment about what we know at this time. However, key questions remain about how to implement this program. MultiFunding LLC does not accept any liability as it relates to the timeliness or content of the information we are sharing today or may share in the future, and we are under no legal duty to update any such information or recommendations. We encourage you to check in with your attorneys, CPAs, and financial advisors for additional insights. Where we are in the whole story of the PPP forgiveness, progress is being made. We received updated lender forms and instructions and borrower forms and instructions for how to apply for forgiveness this week, and that's why we're here today, and that's great news. However, I do want to be clear that in many cases, guidance is still needed, and there will be questions that you ask today that I promise I will not be able to answer. In the new guidelines, there are two forms laid out, an easy form and an expanded form. And I want to be clear that there's a big distinction. If you are able to apply under the easy form, this process and the work it takes to get ready is going to be a lot easier. If you need the expanded form, it'll be a lot more work. Today's webinar, we're going to talk about the easy path and focus on the easy form. And we've added an webinar on Monday for the expanded form. So I'm asking Hannah to go ahead and put a registration link from Monday's webinar into the chat. And so if you are not a candidate for the easy path after you hear the criteria, this probably isn't for you, and you should log back in on Monday to learn about the expanded path. Again, there's two paths, the easy and the expanded. And today we're going to focus on the easy. To help figure out how do you know if you're a candidate for the easy? Some quick definitions are important to help understand it. You're going to pick a covered period for your forgiveness. That will either be 24 weeks or 168 days, or if you received your PPP loan before June 5th, 2020, which is for most people, you can elect to use an 8-week covered period. Alternatively, there's an alternative payroll covered period, which is for borrowers with a bi-weekly or more frequent payroll schedule. You can elect to calculate your eligible payroll costs using the 24-week or the 8-week period from the date your first payroll kicked in after you started. So that gives you a time gap of a couple of days. So how do you determine if you're eligible to use the easy application? You have to meet one of three criteria, and let me explain. If you are a self-employed individual, an independent contractor, or a sole proprietor, and you had no employees at the time of the PPP loan application, and you did not include any employee salaries in the computation of average monthly payroll in your borrower application form, you are going to use the easy one, and this is the one for you. So that's pretty clear. Again, self-employed, independent contractor, or sole proprietor, without any employees at the time of the PPP loan application, you are going to use the easy process and it will be easier for you. There are some additional possible ways to do it. Second criteria is if you did not reduce any annual salary or hourly wages of any employees by more than 25% during the covered period, and that is to comparing to between January 1st and March 31st, 2020. So let me be clear. You didn't, for anyone earning under $100,000, if you did not reduce their salary or wages by more than 25% while for your covered period as compared to January 1st and March 31st, 2020, that is the one criteria. And two, you did not reduce the number of employees or the average paid hours of employees between January 1, 2020 and the end of your covered period, then you are a candidate for the easy form. That's 1 and 2 for this criteria. You can ignore reductions that arose from an inability to rehire individuals who were employed. If you are unable to hire similarly qualified employees for unfilled positions on or before December 31st, 2020. And you can also ignore reductions if an employee's hours that you offered to restore and the employee refused. So again, let me just be clear. If you did not reduce annual salary or hourly wages by more than 25% for anyone earning under 100K, and you did not reduce the number of employees on your payroll, with exceptions allowed for an inability to rehire individuals, and you can ignore reductions if you offered them extra hours and they refused it. Those are the second set of criteria. Criteria number 3 is, in a similar fashion, you did not reduce annual salary or hourly wages, and you were unable to operate during the covered period at the same level of business you were before because of COVID-19 related rules and restrictions. This could be the maintenance of standards of sanitation, social distancing, or any other work or customer safety requirement related to COVID-19. So they are offering an exemption if your business was such as a restaurant, a hotel, or etc., where you simply were not allowed to operate in the same way as you were before. This is now an allowed upon exception. So these are the criteria that you meet in order to fulfill the easy form. If you do not meet these criteria, the rest of this webinar is not really helpful to you, and I encourage you to log back in on Monday, where we will go through the expanded form. Just to repeat, this is about the easy form, where you must meet one of these 3 criteria and not the expanded form. Now, what can be included in forgiveness in this form? What cash compensation is allowed? The sum of gross salary, gross wages, gross tips, gross commissions, paid leave, and allowance for dismissal or separation paid or incurred during the covered period. To be clear, for each individual employee, the total amount of cash compensation eligible for forgiveness may not exceed an annual salary of $100,000 as prorated for the covered period. For an 8-week covered period, that total is $15,385 for an individual. For a 24-week covered period, that is $46,154. To be eligible to include compensation of an employee who were employed by you at any point during the covered period and whose principal place of the business residence is in the United States. You cannot include someone who was not employed or does not live in the United States. Payroll costs are considered based on the day that the paychecks are distributed or the borrower originates an ACH credit transaction. Payroll costs are considered incurred on the day that the employee's pay is earned. Payroll costs incurred but not paid during the borrower's last period of the covered period are eligible for forgiveness if paid on or before the next regular payroll date. Otherwise, payroll costs must be paid during the covered period You can only count payroll costs that were both paid and incurred only once. And to repeat, you can only include payroll costs for employees whose principal place of residence is in the United States. How do you calculate employee benefits? Employer contributions for employee health insurance, including employer contributions to a self-insured, employer-sponsored group health plan, but excluding any pre-tax or after-tax contributions by employees are eligible. You do not imply the employer health insurance contributions made on behalf of a self-employed individual, general partners, or owner employees of an S corporation because such payments are already included in the compensation. Employer contributions to employee retirement plans, including any pre-tax or after-tax contributions for employees. But you cannot include these on behalf of a self-employed individual or general partners because such cash payments are already included in their compensation. Employer state and local taxes paid by the borrower are assessed on employee compensation, excluding any taxes withheld from employee earnings. Now let's talk about owner compensation. You can enter any amounts paid to owners, owner employees, a self-employed individual, or general partners. For a 24-week period, this amount is capped at $20,833, the 2.5-month equivalent of $100,000 per year for each individual, or the 2.5-month equivalent of their applicable compensation in 2019, whichever is lower. For an 8-week covered period, this amount is capped at 8/52 of 2019 compensation, up to $15,385. Other allowable expenses include your mortgage interest payment paid or incurred, business rent or lease payments paid or incurred, or business utility payments, and these include electricity, gas, water, telephone, transportation, or internet access. All eligible non-payroll costs must be paid during the covered period or incurred during the covered period and paid on or before the next regular billing date, even if the billing date is after the covered period. Eligible non-payroll costs cannot exceed 40% of the total forgiveness amount. You can count non-payroll costs that were both paid and incurred only once. There are some documents that you will be required to submit with your application to your lender. Bank account statements or third-party payroll service provider reports documenting the amount of cash compensation paid to employees. Tax forms for the periods that overlap with the covered period or the alternative payroll covered period. Payroll tax filings reported. State quarterly business and individual employee wage reporting and unemployment tax filings reported. Payment receipts, cancel checks, or account statements documenting the amount of any employer contributions to employer health insurance and retirement plans that the borrower included in the forgiveness amount. You must back everything up. Likewise, your mortgage interest payments, your rent or lease payments, copies of the current lease agreements, lender amortization schedules, utility payments, copy of your invoices. Everything has to be accurately documented and brought to your table. There are, and I won't go through them here, but we will share them in the slides, a slew of additional information that you must keep but not submit. Just to be clear, and we can provide it in the chat again, we will be providing an Aminar on Monday at the same time, noon Eastern time, on the expanded form. That will go into more detail on the expanded form, but we elected to do one at a time. Today is the easy, and Monday will be the expanded. MultiFunding does have CPA partners who are available to help in this process if you need it. To remind you, this Aminar will be emailed to you and posted on our community site. And as additional meaningful guidance or new information comes out on this process, we will be happy to share it with the community and provide updated Aminars at that time. Now, with that said, I'm going to hand over the floor to Hannah, and we'll be happy to take your questions. We'll just try to take them one on one and answer them as best as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Ami. On the easy, does the number of employees include the owner?
That's not 100% clear, and you'll have to ask your lender that or wait for further guidance.
The change from 8 weeks to 24 weeks means you can claim forgiveness on 24 weeks of eligible expenses up to the loan amount, correct?
Correct. You cannot claim it to exceed the loan amount.
Once the PPP funds run out, can you lay off employees and still have 100% of the funds forgiven?
It is my understanding that if you have submitted an application in this easy context without any safe harbor constraints on the back end, then at that point you can do whatever you want to do with your employees.
Does FTE and salary reduction rules still apply under Flexibility Act? If you don't maintain both, the eligible forgiveness is reduced.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Does FTE and salary reduction rules still apply under the Flexibility Act? So if you don't maintain both, are the eligible forgiveness still reducible?
Again, what we've described here is if the eligible forgiveness, if you meet these criteria. If you don't meet the 3 criteria to do an easy application, there will be different rules and regs, and those will be described on Monday.
If one of your employees who makes under 100K salary was reduced by more than 25% because they transition into part-time role, would that preclude us from using the easy forgiven form?
It would depend upon, let me go back. If that person was reduced, bear with me, folks. Depends why they were reduced. If they were reduced at your demand, then it's not a valid exemption. If they were reduced because they wanted to and they refused additional hours, then there's an exemption for that.
Does the annual salary or hourly wages refer to actual contract rates or gross earnings? For example, we have hourly employees with multiple rates of pay. No rates were reduced, but due to COVID, some are working more hours at their lower rate.
I think that's a question you'll have to ask your accountant or your banker.
We are a software as a service SaaS software company that uses rack space for all of our infrastructure. Would our monthly rack space fees for servers, network appliance, etc., be rent or lease of equipment?
I don't think they'd be rent, and I think they would be lease of equipment, but lease of equipment is not considered a forgivable expense. I don't think that expense is considered forgivable.
Commissions paid to several employees are down about 36%. For loan forgiveness, do I need to pay out normal commissions so salaries do not drop more than 25%?
You'd have to evaluate that trade-off, but the fact that total compensation is down so much, which might be for valid reasons, will impact your forgiveness, but you have to decide if it's smarter to take less forgiveness or pay out the people.
How do we define pre-pandemic FTE baseline? Is it annual average?
That's an area that will have to come with further guidance. In some places, just says whatever it was on January 31st. I haven't seen anything for the easy form that talks about it as an annual average.
Is PPP loan forgivable if all the PPP loan is spent on the payroll over 24 weeks? And if we do so, does the rules maintain of FTE apply?
It is forgivable as long as you didn't meet one of the issues, like you didn't decrease payments by more than 25%. If you spend all the money and lived in with the parameters of not reducing FTE or not reducing people's salaries by more than 25%, then you should be 100% fine. If not, you have to calculate how much of it is forgivable, and in that case, you're likely a candidate for the more expanded form.
There's many questions on the 8-week versus 24-week. And if you have to choose 8 or 24 or somewhere in between, or if you can take 10 weeks and
there's nothing in between, it's one or the other.
And if you're on the 8-week plan, how do you change to the 24-week plan?
Again, you have to apply to get your money before June 5th to have the flexibility. And it's not a choice, it's just when you go and apply for forgiveness with your lender. But you're either going to submit it based on 8 weeks of data or on 24 weeks of data. You can't submit it on 12 or 16 or anything like that.
And do we have the option to file for forgiveness anytime during the 24 weeks, or do we have to wait out the 24 weeks?
I believe you have to wait out the 24 weeks. And it shouldn't really impact you because you're not making principal payments or anything like that during the time.
If using the safe harbor for FTE, do you have to wait until the 12/31 to file, or can you file after you have exhausted your funds?
Again, that's a safe harbor question, and that's more with the expanded form. There are no safe harbor requirements that I'm aware of in the easy form, and so we'll defer those questions to Monday.
My CPA said that the new rules say that you must use 60% of your PPP for salary to get forgiveness, whereas the previous rule said that you could use up to 75% and get forgiveness. Do you know what the new language has been changed to up to 60% as opposed to must use 60?
My understanding of reading all the new forms is it says, at least for the easy one, that you must use 60. I haven't gone through the expanded one yet, so there might be something different. But for the easy one, you must use 60.
Will maternity leave affect FTE headcount for the loan forgiveness?
It's a good question. I'm not sure.
S Corp owners allowable compensation, how much is eligible?
So we went through that. Just want to show everyone the slide. These are for owner employees, a self-employed individual, or general partners. For a 24-week covered period, this amount is capped at $20,833 for the 2.5-month equivalent of $100,000 per year for each individual, or the 2.5-month equivalent of the applicable compensation of 2019, whichever is lower. So they're not letting an owner get the equivalent of 24 weeks. The owner can get the equivalent of 2.5 months or 10 weeks of salary relief.
If I run out of money in week 15.
I'm sorry, Hannah. Yeah. And for an 8-week period, if you choose an 8-week, then your base is 15,385 instead of 28,33. So say you are a self-employed individual earning $120,000 a year. It completely makes sense for you to wait the 24 weeks and you have no other expenses, then you'll get the full amount forgiven.
Mm-hmm. If I run out of money in week 15, am I still required to pay my managers at least 75% of their average gross wages all the way through the 24 weeks to get full forgiveness?
I believe that is the case. And you have to do the trade-off then in your head to determine if it's worth it or not, depending how your business is doing. Again, getting a full forgiveness seems like the goal, but in some cases, you might be better off economically or for the viability of the long-term business to get 80% forgiveness and carry a bit of balance as debt, but you still, other things in your company remain healthier as a result of that decision.
If an employee was terminated for a cause, is that still an exemption on the easy form?
Yes, well, but you then have to make all reasonable efforts to rehire that employee with somebody else. And if you've made reasonable efforts and you cannot find a qualified candidate, then it's okay. If you do not make any efforts to rehire that person, then it's not okay.
Does the same apply to what if you had employees leave after Jan 1 of their own choice?
Same situation. For an exemption for that employee, you have to, the way I understand it, you have to try to rehire them and find someone comparable to them. If you can do that, great. If you can't, then you're out of luck.
And that's still eligible for the easy form, correct? If the terminated and replaced employee?
Correct. Folks, just to be clear, we're going to take about 3 more questions and then we're going to wrap up. We will be back live on Monday going through the expanded form and then also ability to answer any questions then. If you have questions that you did not get to and you want to post them on our community site at realtime.inc.com, we'll do the best to answer you there. So we're going to take 3 more questions and then move on, but that's the just other options I wanted to give to you to get your questions answered.
Is bonus covered, which is considered a commission on our team?
It should be as long as it's paid and accrued during the period that you're using.
We received the PPP loan before June 5th. Can we use the 26 weeks covered pay period instead of 8?
Yeah, that's your option.
Does the fact that sporting events, concerts, and theaters are not allowable qualify for a ticket broker under criteria 3? There are no events, therefore no tickets to be sold, therefore no business.
I would think that you could make a good argument that that was the case.
Would health insurance premiums fall under the accrued or paid payroll cost criteria?
I think it's one or the other, and it has to be for the time period that was eligible.
If the employer only contributes $200 towards the employee's premiums, will only the $200 be counted?
Correct. And Hannah, we're going to take 1 more question and then we're going to wrap up.
Is it entirely up?
Find a good one.
I know, I'm getting nervous. They're all very similar of the 28 to 20 or 8 to 24 week. So, and it's entirely up to our discretion whether we use it. What are you considering as an owner employee?
We'll need further guidance on that. So I'm assuming someone who owns stock in the company, but in the guidance, they might say they have to own a certain amount of the company, but we haven't seen that yet. Folks, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I hope as we bite away at this, we're able to provide you more clarity. I know it is confusing. I mean, I know the benchmarks keep changing a little bit, but we're just trying to do the best that we can. Remember, we will be back on Monday, same time, same place. The links are in the chat rooms, trying to provide you with more information. On Monday, the focus will be on the expanded forms. And with that being said, we thank you so much for your time. We wish everyone a good weekend, and we'll speak with you soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.